1, 2, 3, 4. Almost a weekend and you don't know what to do. Or you just need something fun to listen to.
Southside Pod!
Yes, we're on the air.
Pod.
And the gang's all here, all things on the South Side. We're listening to the Southside Pod. Looking for the best Southside breweries. Or you might just need an awesome place to eat.
Southside Pod!
Mount Greenwood, Evergreen,
Southside Pod.
Blue Island, Beverly, Payless, and Allsup 2. You're tuned into the Southside Pod.
Southside Pod!
Oakland, Midlothian,
Southside Pod.
Oak Forest, Chicago Ridge, Flossmoor, and Bridgeview. You're listening to Southside Pod.
Southside Pod in a kitchen. Normally you see us like running around in a park or like in some storefront or in a really busy crowd. Instead what I'm at is I'm in a kitchen in Lamont while some guy drills something like 3 floors up, and I don't know how to get him to stop, so apologies for that. But I have Dave Faco here, and he is not the owner of Big Dave's Shed. He's got Big Ed's Shed. First of all, what's with the name, Dave? How are you?
It's actually a poor calculation on branding for a long time. Because obviously my name is Dave,
right.
And the name of the business is Big Ed Shed.
Exactly.
It's named after my dad.
Okay.
My dad was a truck driver. He really was an adventurous, fun-loving guy. He loved the outdoors. He loved cooking outdoors and grilling and barbecue and everything. And it was kind of just an ode to him. He loved a good old brandy old-fashioned and a few cocktails and barbecue. So we kind of named it after him. And that's kind of what we like to do, too, is an adventurous form of barbecue.
I like that, though. I like that. Name it after Dad. All right. Next podcast, I'm naming it after Dad. His name is Ed as well. It works out perfectly. So you do all kinds of cool stuff. You're not a restaurant. Instead, you're doing catering. You're doing events. You're also teaching people how to cook barbecue, which I think is really interesting. You know, I mean, you have barbecue places right here in the area, and you're like, they can have their restaurants, they can do their thing, they're good at what they do, but you have taken a completely different route with barbecue. Why have you done that?
It's just kind of what I enjoy doing more, and I definitely prefer like the personal service you get with catering or doing personal chefing. I do a little bit of that, and teaching the barbecue classes especially, that interactive relationship with the people in the classes. We get them up, they demonstrate. I actually have them cook, tell them to bring their aprons and everything. So it's just a way I like to do it more than having a restaurant sitting around at a restaurant. But we do have some great barbecue in the area. Matt's in town in Lamont, amongst a variety of other places not too far from here.
I love the idea of teaching people how to do it. Like, I'll give you my experience a little bit in barbecue. My dad didn't do it, right? If he was going to barbecue, he has one recipe. He makes a barbecue chicken. And I've watched him do it. It's spectacular way he does it, but he's just using a store-bought sauce. Mm-hmm. He's just kind of got his system where he wraps it in tin foil. It falls off the bone. And he's just using a regular grill. To him, that was barbecue. Like, he didn't do any of this smoking thing. I got into smoking by, traveling to different places and seeing them do it and saying, I want to do this. And I started off with one of those tiny little, like, smokers that you get. It was like $100, and I got into ribs right away. And since then, I've upgraded a little bit with my smoker. I've tried different things. But in reality, it's whatever I can just read in a book, because it's not like anybody lets you in on their secret, Ed. Or Dave. I call it Ed. Not like anybody lets you in on your secret, and you're letting people in on the secret. You're teaching them how to do that. Tell me about that.
I just really like sharing the experience. I've been doing this for about over 30 years, barbecuing and grilling, etc. I've been catering for people's home parties for that long as well. And I just really like sharing the experience. I want people to walk out and saying, I can do this at home, in addition to hiring a caterer to do a party or going to a barbecue restaurant. I actually even do barbecue classes as home parties. People will bring me in, and rather than just cater the party, I do the class at the house party as well.
But how much you get to teach them? Because some of these things take hours. Are you at the house for 12 hours?
No. Although we could do that.
We prepped it, and now we're all going to sit around for the next 12 hours while it's smoked.
Typically, the classes are about 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
And what we'll typically do is the things that take much longer to cook, I'll cook them ahead of time or have them at least started before I get to the class. So, for example, I taught a class at Pollyanna one time. I showed up at Pollyanna's parking lot at about 3 a.m., fired up, Had a Pollyanna beer while I was doing it.
Well, you should.
and the class started at 11. So I was there for 8 hours prior to the class even starting. So that's kind of how we do it. And then we also do things in the class that you can do within that time frame. So we actually show them how to make rubs. We show them how to make sauces, and we actually make some of the sauces. And we do the things that you can cook a little quicker, like chicken or even ribs and things of that nature can be cooked within the class.
All right, so we're going to get into what makes good barbecue because you're preparing some things today, which I think is amazing. So we're going to take a look at it. But first, let's talk sauce because I look over here at what you have, and you have different kinds of sauces.
Correct.
You have your Western Carolina barbecue sauce, your South Carolina barbecue sauce, and a Memphis barbecue sauce. Now, based upon my travels, Memphis barbecue sauce, if somebody was sitting there saying, which one do you want to have off the top of your head, I'd probably go with that because that's probably the closest thing to the sauce that most Chicagoans, I think, are used to. The Carolina stuff looks like a mustard, that South Carolina stuff. Not everybody loves that, but it is good. And the Western Carolina, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between that and Memphis. So what's the difference?
So you're going to get a we get a mini barbecue class right now.
That's what I want.
When you want to think about barbecue, there's all different regional American styles, and we could spend hours doing it right here. But essentially, you start on the east side in the Eastern Carolinas, which I don't have that sauce here, but on the far eastern ends of the Carolinas, their barbecue sauces are just plain old vinegar and some pepper, maybe a few other little things. Then you get into the South Carolina style. This is European immigrants, Czech, German, etc. They immigrated to South Carolina during colonial times in the 1800s. And obviously a common condiment in Europe is mustard. So they started making mustard-based barbecue sauces.
It's very different from what I think most people grow up having.
It's very different. Yeah. People get shocked when they see it, and it is my personal favorite. I will take that over anything else any day. It is.
You like mustard on your meat?
Yes, especially on the pork.
Okay.
And it works great on the chicken. Not so much on the brisket. I don't like to put pretty much any sauce on brisket. You are definitely going to try it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then you got the Western Carolina, which is kind of a vinegary-based sauce. It's with a little bit of tomato in it.
I saw that more when I picked it up, that it was like
much more liquidy.
Yeah, very liquidy, yeah.
It's commonly known as the Lexington style or the Piedmont style of barbecue, kind of on the western end of North Carolina. There's a town there called Lexington, and it's literally the epicenter of that style of barbecue. Memphis, as you correctly said, is kind of the closest thing you're going to find to things on the shelf, but nowhere near as sweet. I'm not a big fan of sweet sauces or thick and
not
gunky
a big
sauces.
Sweet Baby Ray's guy, huh?
No.
At least you're honest about it.
The first two ingredients in it are high fructose sugar and sugar.
Yeah, well, that's like Dad, when I told you Dad's barbecue chicken thing, it used to be open pit, right? Back in the day, he'd be putting open pit on it, and now he puts Sweet Baby Ray's on it. Yeah. That's what he does. He goes and gets the store-bought stuff. I get honest to goodness, I always get mine like sent to me from like Kansas City, or some other place. Like I have friends in different parts of the country. I'm like, send me some sauce. I'm barbecuing. I generally will do that instead of buying off the shelf here. So I get it.
That's your best thing. You're actually going to go home with all of these. So
this is great. This is why I do this.
You're going to go home, and you're going to go home with some of the barbecue we demonstrate later. We've got a brisket pork.
That's
but
awesome.
The bottom line is, barbecue is regionally driven. And there's all kinds of variations in the barbecue. I call it my barbecue adventure manual that I sent to you prior to this. I explain all the different regional variations and what makes them unique and different. And there's all different kinds. It's based on the type of meat you use, the type of wood that's used to smoke, the type of rub or seasoning you're used, and ultimately also the sauces that you finish the barbecue
Can you
with.
screw up by using the wrong sauce coupled with the wrong kind of wood? Like here's an example for you. So I've done barbecue ribs before so often that there's a local rib competition that I've been in for years. And there's a couple times I've almost won. I've been up towards the top. I'll be honest with you. I'm sure I'm not as good as you. But I had a guy who told me that he drives around and goes to different contests all the time. Tried my ribs and said, I don't understand why these didn't end up in the top 5 or whatever one time. He enjoyed it, and he goes to contests. So I had something there. And what I noticed right away is that Southsiders love sweet. Like what I was doing wasn't sweet enough, and that's why I wasn't winning. So I did this thing one year where I just got applewood, did a little bit of the Jack Daniels things in there as well in my chips, right? Give it a little bit of that smoke and the flavor. Okay. And then I got myself a basic hickory, like it was from like some place in Indiana where the Amish were making it, and I got a hickory sauce, and I went and got myself some apple butter. and I put the apple butter in the sauce. And it was the one year that I placed higher than any other time because people love sweet.
Correct.
I can't tell whether or not you think that's an abomination or was a good idea.
Well, first of all, it's a good idea for what you were doing.
Yeah.
Competition barbecue in particular is very different from restaurant and catering barbecue or backyard barbecue. They're definitely looking for in competition barbecue those sweeter profiles, both in the sauces and the meat and the wood impart on the flavor. Chicago style, which is kind of a little micro style, definitely has a sweet angle to its sauces as well, but not exclusively. If you go to some of the old school Chicago barbecue places like Lem's or something on 75th Street, you're going to see some of the vinegary sauces as well. But it's just, you're correct, that sweet profile is what they're looking for. It's why I used to do competitions. I rarely did well.
Now you're like, I'm done. You go, this is great. This is great. And then these people don't vote for it. And you're like, this is ridiculous. Right.
I remember one time I was in one of the bigger barbecue competitions, and one of the pro teams was next to me, and he tasted my stuff, and he, of course, said it was really good. And I don't know if he was blowing smoke or not, but he said it's really good. And then he laughed. He goes, you ain't going to do so well. He goes, your stuff isn't sweet enough.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I judged just last month here in Lamont when they were doing the festival that was on, where Matt's was having his big thing here in Lamont. He's doing barbecue, and I judged over there. And I remember going through it thinking to myself, I'm going to ignore the sauces and focus on the meat because sauce is in the eye of the beholder, and that's how I kind of tried to judge it. But I don't think that's how everybody does it all the time.
No, and especially I would have loved to have been at that competition, but it was Father's Day weekend, and I was sitting on my boat drinking beer up in Wisconsin. And I would have loved to have done the competition or at least attended it, but in this case, I wanted to sit on my boat drinking beer and having a few brandy old fashions at night.
Okay, so before we move on to the meats,
Sure.
What's your number one tip with making a sauce? Is it keeping it simple? Is it trial and error? Like when you're teaching people how to make a sauce, when you're coming up with a sauce, are you just using a recipe or do you kind of have an idea of this is how you make it?
I think it's all about balance. It's balancing the flavors in here. So all barbecue sauces have vinegar in them. I use apple cider vinegar in mine. They have some type of base. In this case, the Memphis or the Carolina have a tomato base in there as well. Not in the South Carolina as a mustard base. So it's about balancing those two primary components and then the seasoning. So all of my sauces have some of my homemade rubs in it as well.
So you put the rub in the sauce?
I put some of my own rub. I make 3 different variations of rub. I make a traditional Texas brisket rub, which is nothing more than 50-50 salt and pepper. I do a Carolina-focused rub, which is kind of a heavy mix of paprika and onion and garlic and some other things. And then I do a Memphis rub for my Memphis ribs, which is a little bit spicier.
Yeah, spice. Can you get too spicy? Do you put peppers in these things ever, or what?
None of my sauces are particularly spicy. The Carolina one would be the spiciest one, and even that's a medium-ish heat at most.
Yeah.
I got nothing against spice. Some people like spicy sauces, but I try to focus more on my interpretation of the regional styles of barbecue. And spice isn't always a component. It is definitely a component of some barbecue.
All right, we're here at Big Ed's Shed to get Big Ed's to actually do something for you or to find them. Like, how does somebody because you're going to show us the meat now. We're going to go through the barbecue and the secret of good barbecue. We're going to look at what you've made here today. But, like, if somebody wants to find you or they want to eat your food, what's the best option for them right now?
The best thing to do to find me is go to my website, bigedshed.com.
Okay.
We're a mobile catering and event company, and we do, as I said, barbecue classes and some personal chefing as well. And contact us about what you're interested in, whether it's a home party, a work function, or a public event. And then we can talk about availability and different options. We have a variety of packages and a lot of different options to order things a la carte as well.
Okay. Well, before you grab what you have there and we
Sure.
go through it, if I asked you what the secret was to good barbecue, if somebody sat there, if you had one thing that, like, don't forget to do this, or this is how you prep it, or whatever it is, like, what's your number one piece of advice? You teach classes. You must hammer certain things home in every class.
Well, there's actually multiple things, but I think the most important thing to do good barbecue, assuming you're working through fire building barbecue, not some automated system.
No, fire building.
Is
men. Okay,
men building fire.
I go to these barbecue competitions and see these guys. They just bring out like a case, and then they plug it into an outlet, and then they set what they're making, and then they shove the meat in there, and then they start drinking. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. I understand that. I get it. That's great. But what fun is that? I want to build fire. I want to put chips on the fire. I want to have like water pans in there and spray things, and I want to be active.
Yeah, you want to be active with it. There's all different ways to get there. Being active with it, whether it's you're using full logs, chunks, hardwood, charcoal, whatever. There's all different ways.
I use a hardwood charcoal.
That's
Stuff that's steeped just in wood. I don't want any of that chemical stuff. I want the stuff that's the natural wood, but it looks like a charcoal briquette. That's what I use.
I use hardwood charcoal as my starter, and then I use whole logs. I'm a hickory smoker. I use hickory logs
for my whole log on there, huh?
I use splits. They call them splits or stick burners.
Yeah.
Because I have 5 smokers, but one of them's an offset reverse flow laying smoker.
Okay.
And then I have 3 other smaller smokers, and then one other option that I can smoke with as well. I don't have a pellet smoker or anything like that, but everything I have either burns charcoal or wood.
We don't have. I'm going to have to get to the meat here in a second, but
sure.
I am curious about this.
You want to know what's the best thing, right?
Well, I want to know what the best thing. What's the most important thing that you do?
I think there's multiple things, but I think it's building and maintaining a fire properly.
Yes.
2 is staying consistent with your temperature in as you're cooking. That's where the pellet things and stuff come in handy for people because it's consistent.
Right.
The thing is where you run into trouble when you're smoking your barbecue is the spikes on your temperature up and down. And 3 is having balance in the flavors, starting with the meat and the quality of the meat you're using, the rub or seasoning you're using, the type of wood you're using, hickory, oak, whatever it might be. And then ultimately how you're finishing it with whatever sauce, et cetera, you might be putting on it. I think that's got to have a lot of balance. We were talking about the sweetness earlier. Loading up your ribs or some other barbecue with a big, goopy, thick, sweet sauce that dominates the flavor is not balanced, and I don't think that's good barbecue. Some people like that.
Not everybody does.
Not everybody does.
No.
It's all about balance.
I got that. All right. Before we grab that, one other thing. Is there a difference in your mind to smoker setups? Because I got to be honest with you, like I have always preferred, and I've seen the other ones. I've seen them where the water pan's off to the side and the flow kind of runs like, horizontal. I like the one where everything runs vertical. I love the big standing ones. I build my fire on the bottom. I've got a pan of water there. It creates a little steam, keeps everything moist, and I've got multiple racks going up. And I just have this big tower is what I build. I even will hang ribs like from the top of the thing.
Sausages
and that's I love that because everything then it seems less likely to dry out. Am I just afraid to try something new, or what system works best for you?
No, you're onto something.
Yeah.
Like I said, I own 5 smokers. I have an offset.
You like the thing that runs down. Yeah.
I definitely. There's actually a whole section in my classes I teach about different smokers and what the pros and cons of them. Vertical smoking is probably the best and most efficient way of smoking.
It's awesome.
Because if you think about it, what does smoke want to do when you
go up?
It wants to go up.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with offsets. I run most of my stuff in an offset.
So does the steam that comes out of the water pan. It's
right. But offsets, it's just a different system of doing it. You got the bullet smokers, like the Weber Smoky Mountain or similar to the things you buy at the box stores. Those work pretty good as well, as long as you get a decent version of them. One of my favorite smokers I ever had, I'm not plugging the brand, but it was called Backwoods, and it was a Backwoods competitor smoker. I could put about 25 or 30 pork butts in it.
Yeah.
And it was a vertical smoker, had a water pan at the bottom. I burned logs in it. It was insulated, so I could run that thing sometimes overnight in the middle of winter when it was 10 degrees out and burn 3 logs.
That's great. That's awesome. See, we're learning stuff right here. And you said you have a manual, a book. There's a way for people to look at this stuff?
Actually, you get it when you go to my class.
Got to go to his class. All right. Check out his website. We'll give it out one more time. All right, why don't we grab that? I'll take your microphone here, and you're going to go back and grab some barbecue. What are we going to be? I see here on your list, it looks like we got beef brisket and pulled pork. And these are two things that I'm not well versed in. These are things I want to do. Like, I want to do pulled pork, but I'm afraid I'm going to screw it up. And I want to do brisket, but every time I watch a barbecue show, it seems like everybody's doing it slightly different, and I don't know what the best way is to do it. So this is going to be kind of fun to do here. So I'm going to move over. Check out what you're doing here.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to pull our pork first, and then then we'll show you how to slice a brisket.
Okay, we're going to pull the pork first. All right, so we're going to pull pork first here.
So first thing is there's all different ways to pull pork. You can have claws, which I don't have here. You can use a fork. Some people chop it, all those types of things. My preferred way to pull pork is these things. Pulling
Gloves. Yeah,
and
big
you just
gloves,
get in
yeah.
there and pull it.
Remember to check out the YouTube if you're listening to this on the audio, because you're going to get to see some pork here. And, unfortunately, it's a stable camera though, so you're going to have to.
So what we're going to do is we're going to show it to your camera.
Yeah, we're going to show it to the camera over here. This is why I need to hire a cameraman.
So what we did here is we smoked this pork. I actually cooked it this morning. It went on the smoker at 4:45 this morning, and this one cooked pretty quick. It's a smaller piece. It cooked in about 6.5 hours.
6.5 hours for the pulled pork.
Typically, it might go 8 to 12, depending on how big or how we're running on our pork.
Oh, man, that's pretty. Oh, and as you're touching it, it's falling apart. I mean,
so we're gonna get this out of the foil in one piece, and then we're gonna show it to your camera. So
what part of the pig is this? Like, I think that's the thing. People never know what type of meat they're supposed to get to do these things. Is this a shoulder, a pork butt? What is it?
Pork shoulder. It's called the Boston butt. It actually comes from the front hind quarter of the pig right here.
Okay.
Just below that section of the pork is what's called the picnic shoulder. Those are the two most common cuts of meat to use to make pulled pork like this.
So the pork shoulder. All right.
Pork shoulder, pork butt.
Pork butt. Okay.
Boston
So
butt.
pork butt and pork shoulder is really the same thing. They're just calling it two different things.
Different names.
Different
so as you
names.
can see, I'm going to show it to your camera.
Look at that. It's already falling apart as it stands here.
So what I like to do is you can see how this is just,
You just stick your hands in and start ripping it apart.
and this is coming up. Now I always like to cook bone in.
Yeah.
So here, and there's multiple reasons I like to do this. First and foremost, it helps keep the meat together while it's cooking. 2, it obviously adds a little bit of flavor. But 3, when you're done with it, keep it in there. It's like a hot brick in there. It helps keep your pork hot after you're done pulling it. So
when you're done, you leave it in there, and it's a way to keep it.
it's a way to help keep it a little bit warm. So
Oh, that's smart.
all of my when I deliver to my catering people, I always tell them what's in there so they don't freak out and think I'm throwing I'm disposing of something.
Right.
So you just pull it. I'm a big advocate of not pulling overly, just to kind of keep it larger chunks.
Because you will see pulled pork, and it's really just shredded pork, right? I mean, you'll go to some restaurants, that's what it's like, and then you'll go to other restaurants, and there's some chunks, and it's a little bit different how they do it.
Well, you want to have the bark in there, intermingled in there, and so I'll just show it to your camera. That's kind of where I would go after I'm pulling my pork.
Wow.
Now, one of the things I always do, I got to take this glove off, is I always mix a little bit of that Carolina vinegar.
Right in.
Not a lot. Just gets more of a just to add a little bit of moisture and a little seasoning. Although in this case, this pork was so good, we don't need to add any.
I love how you were like, oh, you got to keep it moist. You pulled that thing out, and it was dripping.
And I always add a
So
little.
what's the secret to that? So now you got it to the point, and you're putting on another rub on here, right?
This is the rub that was on when I cooked it.
You add it back in.
I just add a little bit in there to just add a little seasoning into the meat that wasn't on the surface, and then you kind of just mix that in.
All right. So now and that's a new thing for me. I've never seen somebody put the rub back on later, right? Like that's a new one for me. Is that a standard thing, or is that a personal preference?
It's pretty common and standard. I learned it from some pit masters down in the Carolinas who showed me how to do that, and they all just basically said you want to add that flavor back into the meat.
Okay. So how did you get this to fall apart? I think one of the things that like people who try barbecue, the first thing they do is they cook it, they think they followed the entire recipe, they think they did everything right, it comes out and it is not moist and it is dried out. So what are you doing? Are you spraying it constantly with a bottle? Are you soaking it beforehand? Are you brining it? What are you doing?
I simply rubbed it prior to smoking it. In this case, it did probably overnight before I put it on the smoker this morning. So I probably rubbed it about 4 o'clock the afternoon before I put it on. And the key here was the temperature stayed pretty consistent. And at the very end, we pulled it off. We don't wrap our pork butts when we cook them.
So you're not putting in tinfoil at any time?
Not during the cooking process, unless I have to, unless there's a situation where I need to push it through. That's called wrapping, and we could have a whole discussion about that.
It's a thing that I don't normally do, and I see everybody doing it on TV, but it sounds like it isn't
I don't wrap
necessary.
my pork butts. But wrapping is a good idea, but I typically don't because I really want to get that nice bark. And once you wrap, you do impact the bark. Once I pull it off of the smoker, I do wrap it in foil. And in this case, I held it. In this case, it held for about 4 hours. I like pork butt to hold for anywhere at least 2 hours, and 4 to 6 hours is really good. Now,
Is that also something I see that with some barbecue? Like when I did my competitions with the ribs, I would see people hold their stuff. They'd be like, "Oh, it's out. I've wrapped it in tinfoil, and it's going to sit there for a while." I never was like that because it always felt to me when it came off, it tasted good already, and I didn't need to. So, are you saying that that's something you should always do because it improves it? Like, if I was happy where it was then, it's going to be even better if I hold it?
yes, holding is very important with barbecue. Yes, fresh off the smoker barbecue will taste good, but if you let it hold, similar to resting a steak, those juices are going to reconstitute. It's sitting in that foil or some type of enclosed pan, and it's kind of, the heat is creating an ambient steam in there, and it helps tenderize the meat over the time. Some people hold them very long. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a very common technique. Some people hold them for only a few hours.
But you're not putting any more heat on it anymore. You're just keeping
it in a warmer box. You want to keep it at a safe food temperature.
Okay.
So you got to keep it above 140 degrees. Typically, when I pull my pork off, I pull mine off somewhere between 195 and 200-ish internal temperature. That's kind of one of the keys. That kind of leads to this fall apart.
So if you need to keep it at 140, could you just get the smoker back down to 140, wrap it, and put it back into the smoker?
I did that with this. So I throttled my smoker down after they cooked. They were wrapped, and they went back in the smoker just to keep them warm. Once you wrap any barbecue in foil, pork, ribs, brisket, whatever it is, smoke flavor is no longer possible.
Right.
At that point, quite honestly, you might as well stick it in your oven. But the key here is you bring it to a certain temperature. My target temperature for pork is 195. So somewhere in that 195 to 200 range is usually when I pull the pork off, wrap it, let it hold for 2 to 4, maybe up to 5 or 6 hours. And that's how you end up with something that literally fell apart as I was ripping the foil off.
It's incredible. Am I allowed to have a taste? Yeah.
Yes. Here,
Thank you very much.
That's got some bark on it.
Ooh, that is fancy right there. Look at that.
And you're going to get to try this in a minute with those sauces.
It's really good. Excellent.
Do you want to try this or you want to do the brisket now?
Let's look at the brisket. Nobody wants to see me eat.
So what we got here is a prime grade brisket. I only cook with prime grade briskets.
Okay. And when you go in to buy this, you can walk up to the butcher and say, I want a brisket, or is it a different call on the cut of meat?
I cook whole, what are called whole packer briskets, so it includes the entire, I'm walking away from you as I'm talking, it's probably echoing. It includes the entire piece, and I'll explain that in a second. I'm sure others have explained this in other barbecue shows you've done. But a brisket is basically 2 main parts and a third extra part. I gotta put this off here. So you have a brisket, and I'm not going to yank it off because I don't want it to wreck the look of this thing right now. You have what's called the flat part, which sits down here. You have the point, which is kind of this bulbous section that sits on top of here and actually wraps under a little bit. And then in between that, the point and the flat is what's called the decal. It's basically a layer of fat. You can separate the point and flat by cutting along the fat line where the decal is. This was a pretty small brisket. It was only 8.5 pounds or so.
Good demonstration brisket for the podcast, yeah.
But what we did with this one is we seasoned it with a traditional Texas style rub, which is nothing more than a 50-50 blend of coarse sea salt and coarse black pepper.
Okay.
And we smoked this. Similar, we smoked it with the pork butt.
You're not doing anything crazy with a barbecue rub on this. You're doing salt and pepper.
For the brisket, yes. It's no. You think of it steak. What works great with steak? Salt and pepper.
There you go.
We like to run our smokers in the 275 to 300 range. I smoke most everything in that range. That's kind of one of my beliefs, and it leads to better barbecue. It definitely prevents it from sitting on there too long. It's just a good temperature range that I have found leads to some of the best barbecue. And what we do here is we smoked it, and again, this one got done quick, 6.5 hours. You hear the horror stories of briskets taking 18, 20 hours. I avoid that like the plague. Yeah. Typically, most of my briskets finish in 8 to 12 hours. This one went quicker. It's a pretty small piece.
And you're slow cooking this then because that's why it's taken so long.
Yeah, yes, you are slow cooking it, but running hotter than the old style traditional brisket. There was a time where people smoked briskets at between 200 and 225 degrees in their smoker temperature. That's largely going by the wayside, especially in the more commercial side of cooking brisket.
And you could still get the good taste by ramping it up.
I actually think you get a better taste.
Really?
Yeah. The risk of a brisket drying out, one of the risks of a brisket drying out is simply sitting on the smoker so long. That's one of the risks. Just like my pork, though, I don't wrap my briskets. It's a very common process. It's a great thing to do. It really works well. But unless my brisket stalls, and we can have a whole discussion about the stall, but basically the stall is when it stops cooking and it just kind of sits at the same temperature for a period of time, sometimes for an hour or two, sometimes miserably for 5 or 6 hours. You wrap them to help speed up the cooking process, but it also helps tenderize the meat because it's cooking within that foil.
Okay.
So in the same case with my pork, I did not wrap this during the cooking process. As soon as it was done, as soon as I got it to my target temperature, for me, my target temperature for brisket is in that 200 to 205 range, internal temperature. And this one came off right in that number. It was really good. Then I wrap it and hold it. In this case, it held for the same length as the pork butt we just did for about 4 hours. It held before I opened up the foil here.
Wow.
And one of the things...
You have to cut this a certain way, right?
There's a very specific way to cut it, and I actually teach this in my class. So most people would think against the grain is going to be like that, and that's kind of true. You want to always cut a brisket against the grain, because if you don't, it kind of gets stringy and stuff. It kind of gets yucked. This perfectly works fine, but typically the angle on a brisket is like this. It's going on one of the angles. And what I do is before I rub it, before I throw it in the smoker, I find it where the grain is. I do a starter slice and mark it.
Oh.
And you get the benefit of getting that burned end.
Look at that.
You can take the whole thing.
Okay. Well, that is burned. So is this is a burn end? Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Great flavor.
So we're going to take it out of here. Try it. Hold it. So like I said, there's two things with a brisket. There's the flat and the point. This is the point. This is the flat section. This is a smaller one, so there's not as much to work with. What you want to do is slice against the grain. So you're going to do this. You could do it like this, but I like going this way. This was actually taught by me by an old pit master from Texas.
Right. Okay.
He said, always cut a starter slice and follow it. And you're just going to do this.
Oh, look at that.
And what you want to have when you brisket is it's called the bend test. Can you pick it up and hold it? If it falls apart, it doesn't mean it's bad brisket. It just probably means it's cooked long or has been sitting a really long time. What we have here is a moist brisket that's still pretty firm. You can definitely get a taste if you want.
Well, here, let me get a non-pepper part there, because I want to taste the meat a little bit. Not that I have any problem with your pepper
I do
rub.
use a
It's
pretty
good.
peppery rub.
Oh, wow. Very tender. Mm-hmm. Very good. That's excellent.
But
And, you can see this little piece of fat here, and it's still kind of there, but it's, like, the thing is, it's almost like it's changed colors. I mean, it's almost like a sauce, how the fats kind of change.
Yes, the fats start breaking down and they kind of blend into the meat, especially internally. That's actually one of the things that causes the stall that we talked about earlier. It's primarily caused by the breakdowns of the collagens within the meat, but also by the evaporation. That's actually the bigger cause of the stall, and it basically cools off the meat. It's kind of like sweat. It kind of cools off the meat as it's cooking and prevents it from continuing to cook. But I wanted to show you one thing. Like I said, you got your point here and your flat here. The point actually is cut at a different angle.
Okay.
So-
Ooh, this is exciting. All right. Different angle.
So typically, you take the point off, and I'm not going to do this perfectly, but you're going to see it's at a different angle, and you're going to do this. I didn't do that perfectly. It's called the Texas turn.
Okay.
So what you do is you're going to slice the point, the flat. You turn the point. So now you're cutting against the grain on the point. You can actually kind of see how it's the grain there. And you slice them together.
So you're getting some that flakes off, and then you're getting the bigger pieces.
You're getting the fattier point parts and the leaner flat points all in the same cut. So when I serve my barbecue, especially when I'm serving people, not just like catering and dropping off, this is how I like to serve it, so that they get a little bit of both. So you get these fattier pieces in, which you can have a piece right now if you want. Go ahead, take that one.
Yeah. Oh wow. No, that's like butter.
Yes, it's definitely fattier. The point is always got a much higher fat content, and that's why I like to mix them in together. So especially if you're going to make a sandwich, you're getting a little bit of both. You're getting kind of the burnt edges. You're going to get the moist, tender parts of the flat, and you're going to also get the really juicy and fattier pieces off of the point.
That's incredible. I'm going to tell you something right now. The thing that I'm most impressed with, and I just told you, I just judged a brisket contest. Mm-hmm. This here. They're lucky you were sitting on your boat. I'm going to be honest with you. They're lucky you were sitting on your boat, because if I would have gotten something like that, I don't know how it doesn't win, because that is well cooked. You see a smoke ring inside of it. It's pretty to the sight. But then when you eat it, it's tender, has juice, has flavor. I mean, like, it's not dried out in any way. I mean, like that. I'm telling you, they're lucky you were on your boat.
Well, I appreciate that. That's great. I really appreciate it. But that's the goal, is to have a tender meat, but that still has that bite, so it's not mush, and that has that juiciness, but also has that beefy flavor.
Oh, talk about bite. Your brisket rub has got bite, man. You love pepper, don't you?
Yes. Well, this is only 50. I do. I do rub my briskets pretty heavily, but it's only 50-50 pepper.
Oh, it's good. It's good, but man, it's got that kick, because
if you eat
yeah,
just the edges, you're going to definitely taste the pepper. Typically, when I serve my briskets, I always recommend you don't have to sauce brisket. If you do, I prefer a tomato-based, like my Memphis-type sauce. In Texas, it's very traditional to take a sauce like a tomato-based sauce and mix it in with some of the meat drippings.
So let me ask you a question about saucing, okay? While you're bringing that up, so I have done this a couple different ways before. Like you said, well, it tastes good when it comes right off the smoker, but and it'd be nice to wrap it, and I get that. But there have been times where I sat there and said, you know what I'm gonna do? Put a little thin amount of sauce on there about 20 minutes before I take it off. For some reason, to me, it felt like it locked everything in. But then again, maybe I'm just wrapping with the sauce.
No, there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Do you wait until, when do you use sauce?
Me, I never sauce my barbecue prior to serving it.
Okay.
So if somebody orders ribs from me, they get the sauce on the side.
Okay.
You order brisket, it's on the side. You order pork, it's on the side. You get to sauce it the way you want. There's definitely pros to putting it on while you're cooking, especially at the end. It glazes on a little bit and kind of, like you said, builds into the whole thing. But I prefer to let people sauce how they want. So, for example, my Memphis sauce is, if you go to like Rendezvous or some of the other big barbecue places in Memphis, Tennessee, they'll serve your ribs without sauce. They call them dry. If you request a sauce, they'll give it to you. But they want you to sauce it to the degree that you want as the customer, versus them deciding how much it is. Like, I personally don't like, if I ever go to a rib joint and they bring out the ribs and the sauces are on it, I don't like that. So I always tell them, don't sauce it. I want to be able to put the amount of sauce I want on it. I want to put the type of sauce I want in it, those types of things.
Dave, this has been so interesting. It really has been. I really appreciate you letting us into your kitchen. Sure. I think I've learned so much about barbecue that my wife's going to be annoyed, because we're going to be doing a lot of smoking here, especially because we're getting close to the fall, and this is maybe my favorite time. Like, everybody like, oh, I'm out, it's summertime. No, when you're smoking, I like being out there in the fall. I like a little bit of a brisk breeze out there when I'm doing it. And the smoke out there pouring out. The kids aren't bothering me because it's a little too chilly for the pool. Like, that's when I like to do my smoking. We're going to be trying a lot of things. And I guarantee you, I'm going to produce this. People are going to watch this, and or they're going to listen to it or whatever. And I'm going to go back and re-listen and rewatch it a couple of times, because I think I could pick up a lot here.
Actually, my brisket recipe is in the manual I sent to you. Same for the pulled pork.
I got the manual. If anybody wants to get the manual, learn from you, again, give the website out.
BigEdShed.com.
BigEdsShed.com. He's based out of Lamont, but he goes everywhere. And Dave, thanks so much.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
It's the Southside! It's the Southside! It's the Southside Pod! Thanks for listening! Thanks for tuning in to the Southside Pod! Y'all come back now, you hear?